All right. Well, we are going to get started. Hopefully, everyone has been able to join, and thank you for joining. Hello, my name is Tucker, and I'm one of the partners at Smart Design. I'm really excited to welcome you to our Smart Salon entitled Innovation 2.0, New Behaviors, New Opportunities. I'm sure, as everybody knows, the past 2.5 years have been pretty crazy. The world has really flipped on its side. We face a global health crisis that has not been seen for over 100 years. And every generation really had no choice but to adapt and evolve. And even as we look to the future, if you thought the past few years were a little bit unpredictable, it's hard to imagine where things are even going to be going into the future in 2023. What we've seen is really businesses are still scrambling to adjust to the most rapid change in consumer behavior ever witnessed. And many of us have taken a long, hard look at what matters most and changed our lives and how we think. And I know I have. But the other thing is I'm trained as a designer. And the thing I really love about being a designer and a design mindset is that you have to be an optimist. You have to really believe the world can be a better place, and then we can create better experiences around the corner tomorrow. And so at Smart Design, we've been curious about how other design and innovation leaders were applying this type of optimism to this new normal. We conducted a series of interviews over the past few months, really trying to get to the heart of some questions such as what trends will drive the next wave of category defining products? How are organizations seizing this moment by adapting their approach to innovation? And what does long-term innovation even mean in today's world of uncertainty? And how do design and business work together better to leverage each other's strengths? And the result of this work was a recently released report called Innovation 2.0. And today I'm joined by 3 experts on this topic, and I'd like to also introduce my co-host, Morgan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan. I'm an Associate Director of Strategy here at Smart. And today I'm also excited to join Tucker in our second salon on Innovation 2.0. In our first salon, we focused on how organizations and innovation teams adapted to changes as they rode the wave of the pandemic. And today, I'm very eager to hear from Sandy, Michael, and Drew as to how their role has evolved alongside changing consumer behaviors. So with that, let's get started, and back to you, Tucker.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. It's time to meet the panel. I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Hold on one second. I have to remember to share my screen. Sorry. Thank you. Great. Perfect. All right. So first over to Sandy.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Tucker and the crew at Smart Design. And thanks, everyone, for joining today. I'm really happy to be here with you all. I'm Sandy Furshey. Over the course of my career, I have led teams to design and create what's next, what doesn't exist yet. And all of that has been at the intersection of hardware, software, and services. I am extremely passionate about pushing the edges and boundaries of what's possible. And that's, of course, done with optimism, as Tucker well pointed out, and really just ultimately delivering things that is very valuable to people, to the world, to business, and just really committed to fostering creativity, the rigor, the collaboration that's really required to break through and make that happen. So I'm at Tonal, leading design and creative, and that is covering hardware design, software design, design research, design ops, content, as well as the brand and marketing creative work. Before recently joining Tonal, I spent over 7 years at Ford Motor Company, leading the charge to build the human-centered design capability, DFord. Its practices, its teams, and all in service of creating and designing future products and services. This work and practice enabled success of recently launched products, such as the 2021 F-150 hybrid, quickly followed up by the fully battery electric F-150 Lightning, the battery electric Mustang Mach-E, the Bronco, the Maverick, which is a little truck. It's very versatile. Some new commercial vans, and Canopy, which is a new digital service to protect your belongings in and around vehicles, along with the numerous other digital services that are being incubated for future rollout. I'll hit on some of those in a bit. I've spent a number of years leading teams at agencies. I also ran my own business for a while. I've had the great pleasure to work across numerous industries and with business executives at companies like Google, Disney, AT&T, Motorola, Johnson & Johnson, really bringing brands to life and designing new products and services. So I included an image here just on something that's I've recently been working on in my time at Tonal. This is from my team's work with LeBron James that was released over the last week. As I mentioned, part of my job is leading the creative for brand and marketing and how we communicate, really reach the audiences for Tonal. So this is incredibly inspirational working with LeBron James. I share it because it's fun, it's very fresh. He is an athlete investor who turns to Tonal to support his training. He believes wholeheartedly in the efficiency of what Tonal offers. He's all about getting right down to work in the most efficient ways. And obviously, his work really depends on it. But he's also a father of three. He wants to maximize every minute, optimize every move. And we just love how he brings his unique fun and play into how he works out. So we're just excited to share that in the world. You can find it on the socials and whatnot, where he talks about a little bit more about Tonal, the product. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sandy. It's great to hear about what you've been up to. And this image, while inspiring, it's also a little bit intimidating for me. All right, now on to Drew.
Hi everyone, my name is Drew Palin. I'm the only non-designer here, but I appreciate design. And I know one of the topics is innovation and long-term innovation, but I've worked with smart design since 2014. I've been at Gatorade over 10 years. But what I'm so excited about is that, what Tucker and I did, and I'll talk more about it, what we did with CBF, but we worked with them in 2014. We had a version of a smart bottle and it's actually a smart cap back in 2014, but we actually didn't commercialize or launch something until October 4th this year. So it can take a while, but it's great partnering with them. And I've been, as I said, at Gatorade 10 years. I've been in innovation. I've been on the brand side. I've been in sports marketing. And now the remit is setting up a direct-to-consumer business for Gatorade. And so the video that's rolling right here and the background I have is what we launched on October 4th, which is the first supplements that Gatorade's ever had in Gatorade gummies. There's a immunity SKU and a recover SKU with tart cherry. And then it's the Smart GX bottle, which accompanies, you can see in the video here, the app. And the app has three components. One is a sweat patch, so you can scan the sweat patch. You can use the Smart GX bottle. And the third component, which you can see here, is programs from elite athletes. So whether it's Serena or Jason Tatum or Mallory Pugh, you can do those programs. So that'll launch 10/4, and I'm excited to be here.
Great, thanks, Drew. And then over to Michael.
So I think one of the key words that I'll bring up later is focusing on tenacity. And I think as a small world, I think Drew and I worked together exactly about 10 years ago on that same concept. And it took a lot of tenacity to launch that, Drew. So well done. And also to the Smart team. So amazing work. So I'm Michael Sam. Simply put, I build and lead creative cultures that fuel innovation. I do it with a real people-first mindset. So I really believe in teamwork, and I believe that designers have the superpower, right? So, and what we can do is connect our creativity to a business need, driving breakthrough products, services, and experiences. I've got a lot of experience. I won't go through my career, but I'm an award-winning designer, international experience, having worked in Italy, Germany, across many different industries. And I think in today's design world, having pivots and bringing new thinking to different industries and cross-pollinating is so critical. So I've worked within agencies, startups, corporate environments, and I do this with a deep passion to inspire organizations and really bringing a design-centric mindset into the organization beyond design. And I think that's a real critical skill set for all designers in the field. In November 2020, I was appointed the Global Design Officer position for the health group at Reckitt. And I've been very fortunate, as I'm very passionate about the two brands that we're talking, and I'm very interested in personal health and well-being, that I can do this in my day-to-day work. I lead a team, roughly about 16 designers, give or take a few contractors between studios in London, New York, and we also have an office in Amsterdam. I cut across a lot of different segments within our business, from intimate wellness to household and personal care to hygiene to over-the-counter medical solutions in our vitamins, minerals, and supplements business. Super excited to be here. Thank you to the Smart team that's pulled this together. Some really interesting. I think playing in the background is a very interesting design experience for one of our brands, one of the brands that I'm responsible for. It's really leading into this idea of how do we create more personalized experiences around fit, which is one of the topics we're going to dive into. So obviously, this whole process starts with an erection. You really need to try on the product, but it's really about finding your close fit and getting a better experience. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in detail, but it's really around an educational process to give consumers more pleasure during their sexual escapades.
It's great. Thank you, Michael. It's great to see what you've been up to, and exciting to hear about what's been going on. Perfect. So we're going to now transition a little bit more into the discussion side of things. I'm going to just cover a little bit of housekeeping. So for everyone who's listening in, there is a Q&A box within the format. So please feel free to add any questions that come to mind. We'll be kind of looping back to those towards the end of the salon. And then just so everyone knows as well, this session is being recorded and it'll be shared on Smart's website in about a week with kind of a accompanying write-up. So we will now start to get into things. Perfect. So great. So let's get into the first topic. So, I would say over 30 years ago at Smart Design, we really pioneered the practice of human-centered design when we launched the OXO Good Grips brand. And as a company, we've always been laser focused on people. And so the first topic I want to get into is really how consumer trends have accelerated over the past 2 years. And some of those trends have even maybe slowed down. So as an example, we know that e-commerce is obviously way up, but sometimes people don't even understand exactly how far up it is. So as an example, Amazon delivered around 2 billion packages in 2019. That number went up to over 4 billion in 2020, and then up to 5.5 billion in 2021. It's a lot of boxes. But then on the flip side of that, what we've seen is unfortunately sustainability has not fared as well. So things like paper and plastics recycling have actually gone down 5 to 7% over that same time frame. And so obviously what's going on around us and what's going on in the world is really starting to shift some of the things we kind of took for granted. So this salon's focus is really on new behaviors and new opportunities. And so I'd be curious to talk with all of you about how these different trends have been changing the way you think about innovation. And I'll start with Michael. We've already talked a little bit in your intro, but many of Reckitt's brands focus on personal care and wellness. And, personally, I've been following and tracking personalization for many years, and it's a really exciting opportunity. And also prior to joining Reckitt, I think you also, working in more some luxury goods spaces, you were able to deploy personalization in other ways. Where do you see trends like personalization moving into the future for a consumer products brand like Reckitt?
I think, I think personalization is going to it's just going to continue to get bigger and bigger. I think where we see things heading within Reckitt, and again, such a cross section of different brands that we could talk about relative to personalization. But I think in general, what we're seeing towards all of our brands is this personalization leads to more subscription and interesting service business models, which I think we're going to talk also a little bit later around ecosystem design. So I think for any designer coming into personalization at Reckitt, it's about thinking about the end-to-end consumer journey and figuring out what the role of products, services, and solutions come forward with. So I think for an ecosystem, I give you a couple examples, like our VMS category. This is vitamins, minerals, and supplements, right? I think it's very easy to go and get a blood test and identify nutrients that you may be deficient in. And I think I see a world where this becomes a service opportunity, right? So this is personalized vitamins, minerals, and supplements. I think what I had shown at the beginning around our fit experience for Durex, I think we see a more personalized fit experience instead of just a generic shelf experience where size and fit is really unimportant. It's just about relieving the anxiety of purchasing something at shelf. So I think we're going to see a lot of different categories take it in many different ways. But I think it's always going to be linked back to what the kind of what's called the omni-channel experience around. Is it how do we drive more subscription and direct to consumer experiences around our business models? I think our hygiene business really pivoted towards personalized hygiene services. So as you think about the world going back to school and office, we're seeing a lot more focus on how do we personalize cleaning solutions for these environments, because hygiene is now the new health in many cases. So lots of opportunities across our business. I can't give you a whole lot of detail, but I think it's a very, very interesting space and a place where really end-to-end thinking has to come into play for design.
Have you seen any challenges around some of the tensions between trying to deliver more personalized products and services and the scale required for consumer packaged goods?
I think that's the biggest challenge that I face on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I think prior to Reckitt, I was at Grohe, a German manufacturer of kitchen and bath goods. And I think at the volumes that we deal with, it's a lot easier for a company like that to build the supply chain requirements to do this. And I think that's been some of the barrier that we've had is we've just had a hard time getting a lot of our products to the shelf. And then when you start to add personalization at probably smaller volumes, it tends to be deprioritized. But I think we've made some real progress, in particular in intimate wellness category, trying to drive more around size and fit and slowly walking some of the more traditional retailers through why this is important. But I think we're doing a lot of it on our channels where we can control the experience better, so more of the digital touch points, but then also starting to educate what needs to happen in physical retail spaces. But
Yeah,
it's a big challenge. It will always be a
but it makes sense. I mean, I think that you have to deliver personalization where it works well, and then in the other areas a little bit can go a long way. And I think finding that right balance is one of the challenges.
And I would say there's certain leaders in the business where there's more experimentation, and I think it requires more entrepreneurial thinking from the design team, where they've given some permission to experiment and learn, because they can see the business model needs to shift, and there might be a lot of insurgents driving some pressure around some of these tensions that exist from the outside, from competitors they had never seen, right? And the pandemic's brought a lot of things to the surface in terms of new business models, new ways of working, and so forth. And it's required us to really open our eyes and think differently.
That's great. Another trend that I think just, I mean, from my experience, a little bit came out of nowhere from the past couple of years has really been this desire for people to really recenter their lives around their homes and nesting. And for many years, I felt like I was reading trends reports saying that, you know, everyone wants to get out of their house and they want to go spend, you know, they want to spend their money on these experiences. And I think one thing that really placed Tonal really well moving into this pandemic obviously was the ability to deliver this integration of products and services in the house that really rivaled what could be found outside of the home. You know, when Sandy, when you think about that trend and how people are really looking at changing how they think about their homes, their hobbies and their passions, and how they've been recentered around some digital first experiences, how has that affected you know, how you see opportunities either in the home with Tonal or even some of your previous experiences with Ford on the road?
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I mean, as you aptly pointed out in the beginning, things are changing so fast. It's really hard to predict right now how things are going to evolve. So I'd say trends are really important to continue to identify and track. And nesting, of course, was huge within the last several years. But I would say also that so are human truths. Like what are the human truths that are going to endure and prevail? And so that if a trend is passing, we can still meet a need for humanity over time. So I always try to look at it with that dual lens. And of course, you know, with connectivity, data, other technology that continues to enable more and more opportunities that enable the removal of friction in people's lives and offload some of those tasks to do things from home, and just do more of what matters to them in their lives. So obviously tonal helped change the way we think about working out. You know, it used to be you'd have to pack up your bag, go to the gym or your class, you have to take a shower afterwards, you're going to come back home. So something like a 45-minute workout turns into, you know, a couple of hours sometimes at the least. And of course that all changed. I mean, now I can jump on tonal for a quick 20-minute set that could be potentially in between Zoom calls. You don't even have to change your clothes afterwards. You can jump right into a meeting, change later. And, you know, again, like services like tonal are, you know, made these workouts more snackable and less of a time commitment. And you know, this pandemic was really long enough that it forced people to rethink and establish new habits and routines. And routines that are actually quite hard to establish in a normal setting. You know, as we sort of enter into what is next, what is our next normal? I mean, the big question is whether these new habits will stick for the masses or for a certain segment of folks. Or, you know, whether we're just, you know, culturally becoming even more malleable at these times of fast changes. So, I mean, there's that side of it, but, you know, I feel like the other piece of, you know, what's emerging, I just wanted to add one other thing because, you know, the last few years were hard, not only because of the pandemic alone and the losses that so many people faced, but in addition, it's like the climate crisis is raging on, the racial injustices continue, mass shootings have continued, political instability. I mean, people are hurting. They're tired, they're burned out, anxious, or languishing. And, you know, it's like some people are in crisis. And the interesting thing is, of course, the digital services that are popping up everywhere to tend to different aspects of health. And, you know, services that really previously required forward planning, research, logistics for things like therapy or meditation. And these are now sized in more affordable, accessible ways without, again, ever having to leave your house. And that's huge when you're juggling parenting, just running. And so I feel like also what's interesting too is I feel like at this day and age, because of all these things, there's not a single day that passes without, I feel like, a prominent media outlet sharing the latest science on what's most effective and ways to improve your overall physical, mental well-being. And, you know, we need it. People are looking for that. They're looking for expert guidance and for the most efficient and effective practices to do that, you know, in light of all this juggling and some of that stress. So really, you know, at Tonal, I'd say, you know, science and intelligence is wired into all of our workouts and programs. So, you know, we're just looking to tap into the science, to what we know help people build new habits to be healthy, strong, and to tend to that physical and mental health. I know that's what motivates me every day, and it really is what drives Tonal, is just help people be their healthiest and strongest. So we just continue to look at where, you know, what are those needs? What are those enduring truths? How do we fulfill them over time?
Yeah, no, I mean, that kind of unexpected growth of, number one, the focus on mental health and wellness, and then I think in some ways it's become more normalized and acceptable because everyone has gone through a common experience that creates empathy. And I think that has been, at least from some of my personal experiences, I just have seen the level of empathy for all people kind of go up over the past couple of years, which I think just creates much more, can create much more interesting and meaningful relationships. So that's been effective of what we've all been through. Drew, over to you. One of the trends I kind of pointed out at the beginning was just the the explosion of e-commerce, and even newer types of commerce, such as chat-based commerce. And, I guess having worked with Gatorade for a long time, I know the importance of brick and mortar and how that's played a role at really helping the brand stay relevant and be relevant. How are you looking at some of these trends and using the power of the brand Gatorade and the business to try to address those?
Well, first, I just want to say, I think Sandy articulated a lot of the same trends we're seeing, which are out there. The empathy, to your point, Tucker, that's really there. But I think the two things I would point to is one, in terms of the channel shift. So to your point, brick and mortar. So when we say brick and mortar, that's Amazon, Target, Walmart, Kroger, all the retailers, or even 7-Eleven, as you think of what that looks like. But there's a channel shift because you're looking at e-commerce. But the other trend that I think is important to acknowledge is sustainability. So yes, in e-commerce, you can ship liquid, but it's heavy, it's both expensive, and it's not sustainable to do that. And so what my team is trying to do, and it's also, I think, how we look at the new direct model in terms of marketing, is having that personalized relationship with the consumers. So it's, we're trying to set up a direct consumer business. What we're trying to do is democratize sports science. So we're trying to take what Gatorade Sports Science delivers, then democratize that in services, Sandy, like you do, to make people, you're making people healthier. We're trying to make better athletes. But I think going to sustainability points, really important for us, is we can't only be a liquid company, and especially as you look at the channel shift e-commerce. And so what we're innovating with if you've heard of GX bottles and pods. So, it's a GX bottle here, but I don't have the pod on me, but you actually pierce a concentrate pod here. So there's less plastic, it's recyclable, but also looking at different powder forms, looking at shots, looking at all different, we call these beyond the bottle. And also, as you think about this doesn't take another, you're not throwing this away. Like, this is a reusable bottle that you can use again. So for us, it's having that direct relationship with that consumer, being able to personalize on the bottle, and then also being able to have more sustainable forms that we know are going to continue, our consumers are asking for. And there's also a business rationale for us to do as well.
Yeah, it's great. Obviously I'm super familiar with the pod platform, but I think what's so interesting about that is the convergence of the trends that are at play there, because you've got, we're kind of piggybacking off of trends that are already happening around people wanting to use reusable water bottles in general, connecting that to people, kind of having easier access to water, and then realizing that, it's not efficient to ship water around the country and around the world. And so can we just get down to what really matters, and then finding a really cool way to sprinkle in a little bit of personalization in there as well, which always, as we know, is a great hook, and especially with athletes who love to express themselves. So that's great. Cool. So we're going to kind of move into the second topic area now, which is something that everyone's mentioned a little bit before, which is really thinking about how are we working on creating ecosystems, and how does that start to blur some of the underlying business models. So ecosystems is an area that I've been super passionate about over the past couple of years. And I really believe that products and services can come together in new ways to drive growth. And when Morgan and I first started interviewing people a couple of months ago for this new report, I was really curious to see if this was going to come up as a topic. And even though it was something that I believe passionately, specifically we didn't ask about it because I didn't want to kind of lead the questions. But in chatting with everyone at the meet and greet last week, it was really great to see everyone bring this up as a topic, as something that they were all focused on. So I think it's interesting. You all represent slightly different business models where you're trying to blur mixing hardware with subscription services, food and beverage with diagnostics, and then even consumer packaged goods with different types of digital touch points. And I know from experience that these can be really hard to operate within these blended business models, where it's not always clear, where you're making the money, when you're paying for an ad, when it's a service, when it's a subscription. And a lot of businesses are not set up to work within these multiple complex business models. So I'll start this off with Sandy again, but I know that, you talked a lot in your intro about your experience at Ford, and I know that's you can talk a little bit more publicly about what went on there. But you really were helping them move from an organization that was really focused on we create basically trucks and cars to we create products and services that help enable mobility. Can you talk a little bit about, what that journey was like to be part of and support that evolution from moving from a purely kind of product-based organization to something that's a little bit more broader and ecosystem focused?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to give a big plug because, obviously Ford was, especially at that time when I joined about over 7 years ago. I mean, it's known as a hardware company, but holistic thinking and design really opened doors. And these are like doors to new strategies, to new experiences, to meet unmet needs. It's really removing friction. And it was also a door to these new business models. As you mentioned, like these are not easy things to actually pull off. And it's worth nurturing. It could take a lot of time, and it's worth nurturing through design, actually, as a way to, I'd say, show, not tell, what these worlds could look like. Like, who are these customers? What is the opportunity? How do we solve for it? And how it or why is it going to be most impactful to the customer and the business? And this really starts to stimulate, energize the possibility space across many leaders in a business. And it really does actually spur the right conversations, helps one make more confident choices about which strategies, which ideas, which solutions, which business models to actually pursue, because they are big undertakings. Sometimes it actually means you have to build a brand new capability that doesn't exist at the company. So, I mean, at my time at Ford, when we were designing the hybrid F-150, we really took, again, this very holistic approach. But we used our hardware as our starting point because that was comfortable. Honestly, it was, everyone understood, like, hey, we still need to push the edges on the hardware bit, engaging people in that. And we had this enormous challenge too of, like, the F-150 is the best-selling vehicle in America for, I think it's now 40 plus years running, but like, we didn't want to break that streak. So what was coming next? So that was, a way in. And
So no
how do we
pressure
create
there.
that? Yeah, no pressure at all. Just, keep that going. And so, we of course spend a lot of deep time with customers. We're observing them. And we saw and continue to see, customers are using trucks as a hub, whether they're at work, they're at play, they're on an adventure, day, night, and they're also using tools, power tools around their truck. They're tailgating with refrigerators and TVs. They're preparing food on camping trips. Like, you name it. I mean, people are just doing things in and around their trucks. So, we were looking at, well, how do you amplify that? How do you power that? So as an exterior physical hub, we eventually, built in this electric power on board to create this, the endless use of any tool or appliance one might want to use. We also created exterior lighting and a way to, control that through your app as you're walking around, moving around your truck. If you're arriving somewhere early in the morning or need to work late at night, just being able to quickly adjust your lights to keep it safe, keep it productive. We had a workbench on your tailgate, just taking advantage of the flat surfaces and customize some different pieces of that. Again, just all in the service of making people faster, more powerful, more productive in work. But those, again, those were the physical aspects. Mm-hmm. But thinking more broadly across the ecosystem possibilities and what we're observing is, we knew how important, just how precious the things are that people carry in their trucks. So in many cases, the truck and everything in it is their livelihood. And, if tools are stolen, they cannot work. That's like a loss of a work day, potentially 2 work days, and they have to replace the equipment. And so and that even replacing the equipment is time consuming. And if a truck needs servicing, it usually has to be done during business hours. They're going to be offline. They have to go to the service center. So again, as a historically strong hardware company, the first inclination sometimes is to say, oh, we can solve that with like better locks and better materials and go that physical route. But instead, we were, again, explored more holistically, and how do we protect that livelihood? So it's really about creating solutions that were leveraging sensors and connectivity to help monitor, flag, report, deter, and prevent theft from occurring. And that's a digital service, the Canopy service I mentioned in my intro, that we really incubated, and now it's a joint venture with ADT. We also explored, and designed new ways for business customers to get mobile servicing, to avoid any downtime whatsoever. And again, these are just a few examples, because what's so fascinating about this is that it's not easy to just, like flip a switch and go to like seamlessly integrated ecosystem, go. It takes a few steps. And, different companies have, again, different sets of capabilities at any given time. You may have to develop new ones before you can actually launch it. And so, again, we at Ford, it was just, we had to actually nurture and incubate some things in the software space, software and service space, to really get it to where it needed to be. But the key, again, is just to start and to focus, and build some momentum, and so that you can actually move in that direction. I'd say even companies that have been purely digital, they've also sometimes needed time to incubate and build things separately. They've lived apart for a while before they could be integrated. Even if you just think about Google Workspace, there's many different components that were built individually and kind of lived separately, and eventually that all came together as an integrated service and offering that lived on.
Yeah. No, I mean, from some of our experience, I think, one of the challenges with ecosystems is it can be very daunting. And so a lot of businesses look at it and they just freak out because it seems like there's so much to do, and it seems impossible. And I think some of your points around, starting small and also making sure that, not everything absolutely needs to be interconnected to start, at least like some level of independent value, which then gets sort of multiplied as things come together. It really helps, like you say, kind of nurture it through the process, because it's hard to get any brand or business to take a bite that can be required to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Drew, you've had a lot of, really interesting experiences your time at Gatorade around this, just because, obviously I know this pretty well, but, when we first started working together, there was really just a long-term innovation team, which was really focused on basically sports fuel products, what you consume. And then there was a digital engagement team, which was really focused on engaging with your athletes digitally, more from a marketing function. And over the journey over the past few years, you've actually ended up with a dedicated ecosystems team, which is quite interesting, with a team that really has the remit to kind of go across a lot of different types of touch points and business functions to try to get this done. Can you talk a little bit about how that all started and how hard was it to get to that point?
Yeah, no, I can. So, I mean, it goes back, I talked a little bit in the beginning here about CBF. So CBF is a Brazil national team, but in 2014, CBF came to us and they came with the ask of how can we help them win the World Cup? So if you remember, Brazil was hosting the World Cup and they had a lot of interest in doing well. And so what we did is we partnered with our Gatorade Sports Science Institute and we sweat tested the players. And the insight that we got there is that every athlete's unique. When I say every athlete's unique, in sweat testing, you have a sweat composition, so how salty your sweat is, and then a sweat rate, so how much fluid you're losing. And then we looked, across Neymar, across other athletes, and there was a big disparity. And there's also, if you think of Brazil is an ecosystem in itself. There's, different climates. And so you have really hot and humid climates, you have drier climates. And so not only is each athlete sweat unique, but they're going to sweat differently depending on where they're playing. And so what we did, this is where the whole pod platform was born, is so we had made personalized bottles for each player. We then paired that with personalized formulas based on the sweat testing. And so back then, we weren't thinking about ecosystem or anything like that. We were just trying to help them, deliver the right sports nutrition that they needed. But then we saw that need, and we said, is there a way we can actually democratize this and scale this? And so then the next thing we actually came out with is a sweat patch. And so, I talked about this a little bit, but there's a 2-pack, but you have a sweat patch, and actually you put this on your forearm, and you're able to get the same fidelity of sweat testing that you would get from GSSI doing that in their lab or on the field. And so we had that, but to have the sweat testing, you actually scan it with your phone. So you need an app. So now we had personalized bottles, we had personalized or customized formulas, we had a sweat patch, and we had an app. So now it's an inkling of the, of an ecosystem. And so then we really start thinking about, what do we have here? And so we think about, those components. We also had a smart cap back then that, we incubated, we piloted, it didn't actually land. We had to go to new tech. So we have that new tech now. That's another component. And then what we found out is, from a nutrition standpoint, people care about nutrition, but it's not the only thing they care about. So if you can actually combine it and make it easier with programming, and you deliver personalized nutrition along with the programming, I don't know, it's more impactful for that user. And so I don't want to say we stumbled upon it, because Tucker, you've been ahead of the game. You talk about ecosystems, but in terms of actually getting the buy-in, for us, it all started with utility, helping athletes, and then each piece like building on each other to actually create it. And so we actually built, I think, enough momentum now. To your point, Tucker, we have a team. And now we look at sort of the trends in the market in terms of things going to e-com. That makes it easier here for us. Personalization at scale makes it easier for us, as those are big themes. And so we're on the right trends now. But I would say, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, like, we were saying this, but it was going on deaf ears. Like, no one was listening, no one was seeing. But I think it's turned now. So to me, that's really exciting. We're also looking at, Gatorade. We have, for those who don't know, like, we own Muscle Milk, we own Propel and others, and we're trying to consolidate to sort of an ecosystem with ourselves, and we're sort of the forefront of that. So I think we're in a really good position. But anyways, I don't want to say it's easy by any means. It's about incremental steps and delivering value across, and then finally getting to the point where you're there. Because maybe there's a way to do it all at once, Tucker, but I don't know how many examples or places you could do that, because it's such a big task.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible. And I think the other thing is, you never quite know how all those things are going to come together in the right product service fit. And so I think,
Right.
you can't basic test this stuff. It doesn't work, so you really have to, you have to have a lot of flexibility, and you have to kind of look at all of these things as ingredients and look at how to make the right recipe. And so it's important that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, and you have to kind of figure
Right.
out some of the stuff. The technology isn't there yet. Sometimes it takes time for scale. There's a lot of things like that happen. So,
Yeah.
Michael, I know you're sort of,
I was going to say this goes,
there, but
this goes back to the comment on tenacity. I mean, having some exposure to this project with you guys, I think now 10 years ago, I think one of the dots to connect between what Sandy said and what you guys are talking around from a Gatorade perspective is the power of storytelling to kind of work through this. And I think Sandy said show, not tell. And I think that's, to me, it's really insightful. That's the superpower that designers have, is we can sort of visualize and outline what that consumer journey is. And I remember very early on in the Gatorade project, so many kind of cartoon sketches that would navigate through this. Probably the term ecosystem didn't exist, right? But
Yep.
but I think the starting to kind of storyboard that and get people behind what could the business model be. It's a super complex project, but I think that's the power of design, is to simplify it in a visual way, in a storytelling way. And I mean, we're just making inroads now on ecosystem thinking at Reckitt, but I've got a great example from a previous live. We've talked a little bit about my grow experience, where this is kitchen and bath products. This is hard goods. You sell a faucet, and next, in 10 years, you sell another one. How do you get into an ecosystem? One of the things we did very successfully is we developed a water beverage solution that goes into the kitchen. So we were selling water filtration, we were selling carbonators. We actually were really competing with people like PepsiCo and so forth in terms of trying to kill bottled water at the home. This type of innovation was incredibly critical to driving new revenue and new growth, because who doesn't want healthy filtered water in a sustainable way, right? It's I think it's something we worked on. We worked on insurance technology for water damage, right? Shifting from a product that delivers water to shipping a product insurance companies would subsidize for the consumers that would prevent water damage, which happens more frequently than, for example, fire in your home. Water damaging can be devastating. But I think it created a whole new business unit for Groa to get into insurance technology and subsidizing sensors and smart water detection, which also allowed you to start to have an understanding of your total water usage, which led to changing behaviors around water consumption. So I think, in all these link back to, if you're going to make such a pivot in innovation, is the role of creativity to visualize it, to build scenarios, because you can't put that into a shelf test. It will fail. There's no way to do this. You have to prototype through it. You have to walk through the consumer journey. You have really two projects in one, because you've got the hardware, which is super complex. Then you've got the digital aspect, which requires ongoing maintenance and a lot of discipline. So I think ecosystem it brings new business models and opportunities. And this work is gonna come more and more for us in design industry, and even in the business industry. But I think it requires, it uses unique skill sets for design to visualize the options, because there's really no investment at that stage. It's on a piece of paper. You're starting to think through the business model. It's just a possibility at that point. And I think that's the role that I saw you guys nurture with smart design at Gatorade. That's the role that some of my teams take on as they're starting to incubate new ideas. I'm 100% certain it's the same thing for Sandy's team. And I think that's the superpower of creativity. It's just really visualizing the future before you have to invest in it.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick comment. I mean, there's no way we would have sold this in without that. I mean, whether it's videos or 3D printed prototypes or things for athletes to react to or senior leadership, but that without the story, they wouldn't believe any of this because it's so foreign to our core business. So you hit it, Michael.
Yeah. And I think I think in particular in Gatorade, you're so deep into the consumer insights. You are surrounded by the best athletes, which laddered down those original insights to even the amateur athlete, right? Yeah. It became so relevant. You started at the top. Who wouldn't want to work to make the Brazilian national team win? Yeah, I think you couldn't have picked a better opportunity to find your core insights.
Yeah, they got crushed by Germany, but we did everything.
They were devastated for sure.
Nobody remembers that part, Drew.
Yeah, no one remembers that.
That's okay. Cindy, were there any, like when you're on that journey forward, were there any tools that you thought were really effective in kind of closing the gap between what was possible and really, even though you knew you weren't there yet, from like having everything built and functioning? I mean, I know you guys use video a lot. Is there anything else that really helped with that storytelling?
Yeah, we definitely used a lot of video, like quick videos because again, it is just about like, who are these people? What could we do to serve their needs and potentially unmet needs, and like why it matters, what is important, what does it mean for the business? And that was enough to, again, spark conversation and dialogue amongst the business leaders and representation to say, is this an area we're going to go after? And if so, what are the next steps? How would we start, building this new capability? Or how would we decide, like, yes, this is the right solution and idea? So really, again, it's like the storytelling piece that helps set the frame, and then the ability to have the right dialogue to then, help make some of those strategic choices. And again, I feel like the prototyping work, essentially, and the storytelling work that comes out of design, it really does de-risk it, and builds confidence around an area. Because sometimes you have to make those intuitive leaps. It's not just like you don't have all the right data to make that decision. It can't necessarily be a data decision. It's are we going to go after this? What does it mean? Is this return on investment look like the first place we might focus, for example? Because of course you could come up with 20 options, but like, what are the ones that are going to matter most, and which ones could we go after and deliver? But Michael, I agree with you completely that like the superpower of that is making ideas tangible so that you can actually have deeper conversation.
Yeah, two things, from some of our experiences. Number one is, one of my favorite words is to use the word experiment, because it sort of makes everyone way more comfortable, because by definition it doesn't pass or fail. It's like, if you learn something, it's been successful. And so I think that setting expectations around that, and then also we've also seen some of our some organizations just spend so much time thinking about what they should do that sometimes it's just better just to do something, because by doing you'll learn, whereas by talking and working on strategy for a year, you're not really going to be any more right than you were 9 months beforehand. So really more biased towards action, which I think is another superpower of design, as well as just designers love to get their hands dirty, and they don't read anyway, so that's like the number one thing.
Yeah.
So,
and the awesome thing too, I was just going to add, is like, I always like to debunk the myth that like you can't get started until you have the insights. Well, most people have a general understanding, or they do have some insights as a backdrop, but you can start making ideas tangible on day one, working from hypotheses. Like, what is the hypothesis that we're working after? Because you're going to learn really quickly as a way in, just again, using those skills to make ideas tangible and build on them together, and then throw the ones to the side quickly that aren't working, and pull the team where there actually seems to be a real promising opportunity.
Yeah, one of my favorite recipes for like that hypothesis is, understanding what the business assets are, because you're not going to change a hardware company to a software company overnight. And so you can't, it's like that, you got to be realistic about that. You've got to understand the brand, and what that brand truth is, because that's critical to the vision of where things are going. And then, connect it to a timely trend, and you put those three things together and you can run an experiment right away.
Exactly.
And I think this is why it's, I think, important for designers to have their ears at, really at the business level, the business context, because I think in a lot of companies, design is sitting more as a service, like they're waiting to be told what to do. And I think the more we can get design positioned into leadership discussions that start to focus around what's the business problem that you're trying to tackle. And I think then is when that's where the knowledge can be collected, and we can go back and become a little bit more entrepreneurial and take initiatives up on our own to surface new opportunities and so forth. But I think if design's not at that table and they're not facing these headwinds that business leaders are discussing, it makes it very hard to shift design from a service to a strategic point of view. I think that's one of the keys to unlock future innovation. And I really compliment, what Drew and team have done to bring in design thinking the best. Sandy, clearly Tonal's very design centric and design driven. And I think this is one of my biggest challenges, is to get designers at a seat of the table to really shift the business in the long run.
And Michael, I think it's well said. I think it's that seat, but I think the other thing that can happen, and doesn't always happen in Gatorade, but when it does, we do it right, is bring design into that consumer, those insights, like right away. Like it's sort of like, of course, but there's times that those business conversations are happening and then we'll brief design, but they hadn't been along for the ride or the insight. So not only the business context, but also the insight of the consumer, because if they're there with us partnering, to your point, we can show things. And even once we get to that business meeting, it's even more powerful. So I think the earlier we can partner in that process, was where we've had the most success, even before the business meetings themselves. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it kind of brings us to our third topic, which is really, design as a strategic capability. And as, Michael was mentioning, I think, in the early days, design was really seen as an aesthetic endeavor. How do we make something beautiful, delightful, desirable, which is still incredibly important. And it's not, it's critical. But then we really moved into that second wave where we were seeing design being used as a tool for understanding people and kind of bringing brands and businesses closer to their end consumers and users. But now we're moving into this kind of like this third wave where design is in the best case being asked to play a more strategic role, and then in other cases fighting to play that strategic role to really help chart an organization's future and growth. I guess, Sandy, from your experiences, I feel like you've had a pretty successful track record at this kind of balancing the integration of design and business. Any sort of takeaways as to how to really thread that needle? It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, but it's so critically important. I mean, Michael, for all the things you just started leaning into, because to me, it's like the full power of what's possible is only tapped if you do have, business, technology, design working together. because it is about creating joint value. It's like there's value to the business and value to people, and that has to intersect. Because, a team could be off over here being like, oh, we got this great insight and there's this really interesting thing. But it actually, like, the strategy is evolving over here in the business. And like, if those two worlds don't come together, it's a waste of time, energy, and resources. And if I've learned nothing else over the course of my career with ups and downs, like I don't want to waste anyone's time, energy, and resource. Like, let's put it all together and work on the right problems together. Like, what are the business problems to solve? What are the human problems to solve? And everyone, and again, the power of design, because as problem solvers is, really, I'd say framing the problem space. Like, these are some of the skill sets of designers that just help everyone jointly, like, frame the problem space, and really work to help integrate, again, the needs of the people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And I feel like the other thing design really helps amplify is bringing that more, I guess, humanity-centered lens, because I think most businesses are really strong at leading from the business lens or leading from the technology lens. But, I feel like design really puts the spotlight on building the empathy and understanding the human problems and making sure that's part of the picture. Because again, if you're off just solving a human need and these people are off just solving the business need, it's like you miss the whole point. So yeah, I feel like Michael, everything you were saying and more, like, let's just use like the power and the capability to help, again, make things visible, build on ideas together, experiment quickly. I love the experimentation as well. You experiment quickly with little investment, low risk, learn quickly, and just get to the strongest possible solutions as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I think I remember having this moment. This is earlier on in my career where this is like a classic situation, but sitting around in a project room with a bunch of designers and they're looking at a bunch of ideas, and this is what they'll say: "This is the best idea, but the client's never going to go for it." And for a while, I used to always say, "Oh yeah, like the client's so lame; they never want to take any risks." Blah, 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 blah. But then I kind of had this moment where I was like, "Actually, I think that's our responsibility. I think like maybe we're not doing our job." And I suddenly realized, "Oh no, like it's not them, it's us." And that was a real moment for understanding how we all had to make this work. I think, Michael, you talk a lot about talking more about the optimism and the passion of design, and really that magic and X factor that can come through kind of, basically trying to envision the future, working with creative teams and trying to integrate better with business capabilities. How do you make sure that kind of creativity doesn't get crushed by, the pressures that often drive, some quite rigid business decisions?
This is one of the biggest challenges I have with my team, is just keeping the motivation up. And it doesn't matter what team, just every team that I've ever managed is there's so many easy ways to find no in the business world, and it's a lot harder to find the yes. And I think the further I get into the leadership roles, the more I realize that I needed to protect creativity, to keep it precious, to keep the ambition up. But also, I think it requires educating too. I mean, I've become an educator in the business world to help people, not stop ideas before they have a chance to experiment, to explore, and to get killed by the subjective discussions that happen in conference rooms or in Teams calls these days. It's really a soft skill that is not taught in the design world, I think, to keep the motivation and the ambition up of designers. But I focus a lot as a design leader on my team's engagement scores, because I believe that this is one of the drivers of a healthy creative culture. Is if you've got a high engagement score, you've got designers that will step in at any challenge and they're highly motivated. It's a real challenge, though, once they step out of that design subculture that you have. I'm still looking for answers. I'm open to mentor in this space. I don't have all of them, but I believe, you said it very early, is this optimistic viewpoint. My personal ethos is create a better tomorrow. I say this to my kids. I say this to my team. I think that's why I exist, is to see if I can find a better solution for somebody tomorrow or help somebody. And I think it's just something that in a creative, you've got to believe what's next. You got to believe what's next is going to be better and keep that optimism up. And I think you role model that behavior. Even when the times are tough, you have to stay true to that. So it's more of a mental strength. And I think you need a lot of tenacity as a designer. You got to push through, and you got to sort of enjoy being told no.
Yeah.
And break every single rule to get through it along the way. And I think there's some companies that will tolerate that, and there's others that it's all right. I don't mind being the black sheep around here.
Yeah. Well, Drew, I know you're not a designer, so be curious, as someone who, seems to have really strong relationships with design functions within the organizations that you work with and the teams, what have you seen as successful collaboration working with design? What, as a business leader, what are the things that designers say and do with making decisions with you that you find to be effective?
I mean, for me, I think this goes to the point, I think I cover this, and Sandy mentioned this as well. But I think the most success we have right now is we have, I think, 3 designers that are embedded with our team. And so, if we're seeing anything, if we're having any business conversations, we're having it with the whole team. So we have what we call base camp, which is like a weekly team meeting. We go over updates across, and some may not be relevant for design, but I think about this conversation, and it's actually maybe very relevant because they understand the context we're under. And so I think just the full context with business and consumer and what that looks like, and embedded with our team, and they've been able to churn things out with great value because they understand that. So there are briefs and other things, but for the most part, it happens organically because they're just part of that team. So to me, I think I think it was through happenstance. And also there's a peer of mine that I work with, Chavi, who he used to be a designer. So he's a big advocate for design and knows what they can deliver. And you can see how great he is in the business context because he has that strength and that muscle. And so not saying you need to have an ex-designer as an advocate, but if you have advocates who understand that value, they can be the right proponents to do that as well. So those would be the 2 things I would say.
And what absolutely drives you crazy working with designers?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying with embedded. Like if they have no context, like if they don't understand the business context or to your point, Sandy, they may not need to know that consumer insight, but at least they should understand enough about the consumer to have hypotheses that are informed by something. But if it's informed by something that's not informed by any hypothesis or any knowledge, I don't think it's moving the work forward. But again, I don't know that that's design's fault. It's more of a process thing and how you get involved in the right way and at the right time.
Yeah, no, that's great. Good. One quick question before we move into the Q&A part of the salon. So just kind of short answers on this one from everyone. I've read some stuff in the press recently that the word design is really being way too overused, in some ways devaluing or sort of lessening its potential impact. Do you think we should be using the phrase design more or less?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
I'm a big fan of using more of it, but I just want to drop the thinking part of it from the equation. Okay. From that aspect. But no, I think design and brand experience is what we should be talking a lot more about.
Good. Sandy, any thoughts?
I love the question. I'm like, maybe about the same. I'm not sure more, not sure less, because again, there are some specific skill sets that can be really useful. And again, like rallying around some of the superpowers, like the craft that allows you to make your ideas tangible and to be able to tell compelling emotional stories. Those are all really valuable things, but that's not to say it's an exclusive club that, anyone can learn, be trained, and if that's an area of passion and interest. But it does feel like an important component because, as I think about, when business technology design coming together, everyone has like a strength or some pillars that they sort of rally around, and design has some of those as well that are really important. Like, again, bringing that humanity lens to the table and leading through that knowing that the other lenses will be well covered from a finance perspective on a business side, or yeah, from a like technologically speaking, what's possible. So I still feel like it's an important piece to the puzzle.
I'm gonna build on top of what you just said, Sandy. I think at the beginning, I said I'm there to work in kind of design-centric companies, and I think as a designer, anything you can do to infuse more design centricity in an organization is going to elevate the role of design in the company. So I don't know, Tucker. I think you've got like 2 of 3 going for more use.
All
of
right, Drew,
time. We gotta see where Drew's heading here.
No, I say more. I mean, if you think about like the ecosystem we're creating and the touch points, like, we have 3D, we have 2D, but also we have this digital expertise. We're missing that a little bit just because we're not a native digital company. And so for us, we need more, and we're trying to get more to be able to solve those needs. So
great. It was a little bit of I was worried asking that question, because if you guys answered one way, I might have to change the name of the company and drop the design. So perfect. We're gonna move over to Morgan and see if we have any questions that have come in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question here goes back to our first topic. Michael, you mentioned that personalization is a good hook to bring more subscriptions for businesses. And so the question that we have here looks at the flip side of the equation. Are subscriptions really what consumers want? And is there a point of saturation where consumers refuse to adopt new subscription and services because they have too many?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. I think you've got to have the right reason to have a subscription business model. But I think it's Chris that asked the question. So thank you. Actually, the only question I think that I see in the chat. But one of the things that we see in our intimate wellness categories, so for somebody that's looking to buy condoms, for instance, it's a very, very stressful situation. And there's a lot of anxiety and shelf shame. And there's like, I don't want to be caught there. And I may not have the time to make the right decision. And I think if there's a way that we can change that whole experience and make it more discreet or more, it just as a way to offer a benefit, then I think it leads to more of a personalized fit. I know what I like. I can explore different sensations. I can avoid that. But I think it heads down the right type of business model, because you alleviate some form of consumer pain that exists in the category. So yeah, we shouldn't do subscription services just because we can. I think that's probably the worst possible use of resources, but I think it goes back to unlocking a real consumer tension, driving a benefit behind that, because then when they come to repurchase, the data is already there to know we can orient them towards this type of fit. Because by the way, the wrong fit with something like this could lead to a tragic situation, right? So I think it's one of the areas that I highlighted at the beginning, but there's a lot of different ways. But I think it's a fair question. It's an and it goes back to businesses to kind of flesh out, are we really doing the right thing from a business model thinking? I think about what Sandy had mentioned around, I think this ecosystem around trucks, right? Somebody losing their tools and not being able to work, that's an amazing problem to solve. And I'm sure there's a huge amount of consumers that would sign up for a subscription service around that. So I think it goes back to that problem you're trying to solve and define it.
Gotcha. Yeah, subscription for the sake of subscription, but also just providing additional value to the end consumer. That makes sense. Another question that we have here is looking at 2023. What types of innovation tactics and methods are you all investing more in, and what are types of be investing less in?
Who are you directing that at? Do you want
all of you? Anyone who wants to go first and tackle that?
all right.
Okay, I could jump in. I may have an unconventional response, but I'm just going to say right now, and it's building on something Michael said earlier, it's like it all comes down to investing your time and energy with people. Yeah, no matter how hard or how many constraints you have, it's just like build the relationships, find out what makes people tick, rally people people around a shared vision, shared goals, and, it's just like help people see, hear, feel that they're all working toward the same common goal. Because ego can definitely invade sometimes. It's like, especially like people are dealing with, who knows what they're dealing with in their lives. But if you can always just peel back the layers and say, hey, this is what we're driving towards. That we're all in the best interest of, like, again, like, how are we going to create this amazing thing for people that's really going to actually make a difference for this business? It's going to move the needle and getting down to the heart of the matter. So yeah, to me right now, it's just people.
Yeah, I think I'd echo human potential. How do you foster more potential out of the wonderful creatives that we all have around us? And I think I echo the same thing, because I think we're all suffering from not having that human connection. How can we still foster that? And I think that's going to be the big thing for me as well, actually, Cindy.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would just say in this is, I agree that human potential and connection there is that, like, patience. So it's a little bit like less on what we're investing for, but the patience to get something new out, which I think goes to the conversation about piloting, working fast, working on hypotheses, because to me, no matter what method we're going to use, people are expecting things faster than ever, at least from our side. So.
And what are you investing less in?
Well, I mean, to that, what I was just saying there, it's a little bit like there's less patience for like long-term bets. You can get to sort of long-term breakthrough things by piloting and like testing and the storytelling that Michael talked about. But if you don't have those components, I think it's really hard to do anything that's really long-term.
That makes sense. And one last question that we like to ask in those sessions of Innovation 2.0. So Drew and Sandy, you probably already got it, but I think it's always interesting to wrap up the salon with that, is if you could give a fellow innovation leader a piece of advice today, knowing where you are now after a couple of years of pandemic, what would that be? Or if you could give yourself that piece of advice, what would that be?
I think the advice that I would give would be to first take care of yourself. Focus on your energy, your mental health, your well-being, because I think you can't lead an organization without yourself fully centered and grounded. And I think it really comes back to taking the discipline to make sure that you're a role model for health, well-being, managing stress. I think this is so important to role model, to keep the energy focused on a total human perspective of what, how can my team or this future innovator bring their full self to their work and enjoy it on a day-to-day basis. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to do this in the long run.
Huge +1 to that. And I would say also just like give oneself grace, as well as giving grace to others. Like, again, we don't know what's going on in people's lives, and I think assuming good intent goes a long way, and grounding people again in the common goals of, because at the end of the day, most people just really are they want to do their best, they want to provide meaning and value, and it's tapping into that.
Yeah, I would just say it goes to like an imposter syndrome, and like you may not be an expert somewhere, but be willing to take a risk. I've been on this ride. I'm not a digital expert, not ecosystem expert, but I just saw and had passion that there's something here. And, for years, it never really resonated. And now I'm in a spot where I think we're close to a tipping point where it's really important. So there's this quote, like, let the trend be your friend. And, if you're willing to take a risk, just go take that. So.
Those are some very inspiring words to end.
Yeah, great. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time. So for anyone in the salon, if you want to revisit the discussion or share with others, we will be posting the recording on our website along with a summary in about a week. And of course, if you want to learn more about our Innovation 2.0 report, there'll be a link that's being shared. And then again, a huge thank you to Sandy, Drew, and Michael. It was really great to connect with all of you, hear about what you've been up to. And I love and I'm energized by the optimism for tomorrow. And so we're looking forward to the future. Thanks again, and everyone have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thank
you.
you all.
Bye.
Bye.